It took quite a while to get Royal Paladin and Dimension Police reveals, but we're now 2 days later and we already saw 2 new clan reveals for the V Clan collection. And so far we saw field nukes and infinite countercharging. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and as said in yesterday's video, today we're gonna tackle the new V Clan collection reveals, because yesterday we got the new Kagero Seal Dragon cards, and today we got the brand new Angel Feather Celestial cards, which honestly are very interesting, and I'm liking the direction they're taking these cards, as both these support waves are very typical to what they did in the past. Their archetype-like playstyle is very in theme of what they used to be, but they have a V-series twist in them, which makes them more viable in the current environment and also opens up for more generic options as well as potential future upgrades. But without any further ado, let's jump straight into these cards, as we got 3 new Kagero cards and 3 new Angel Feather cards, which are basically their effective new right line, as so far right lines are a thing in the V-series. So first off, we're going to start off with the one for Kagero, and we have this great one, which is Seal Dragon. I believe it's pronounced Currency. I'm gonna go with that one right now. So Currency's ability is, although when this unit is placed on a Vanguard circle or rearguard circle, cost Soul Blast 1 and discard a card from your hand. Choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. Your opponent chooses up to 1 grade 2 unit card from their hand and calls it to an open rearguard circle. The auto abilities of the opponent's card do not activate from this call. If no cards were called, you draw 2 cards. So effectively what this card does is it removes one of your opponent's rearguards, and then your opponent can decide if they want to call grade 2 from hand, and if they did not, you are going to get 2 cards from it. And that turns it into an effective +2 in card economy, as the Soul Blast 1 you discard, but you draw 2 cards, which is a +1 on your side, but you also snipe one of your opponent's units, which is hence the +2 in card economy. And as far as I'm aware and how you can interpret this skill, I believe that you don't have to retire one of your opponent's units to force your opponent to call the grade 2 or get the draw. It's not a then clause, which means you resolve as much of the skill as possible. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. Now, the thing about this skill is that you're probably never going to resolve this when you ride it on the Vanguard circle, as there is not really a lot of value to be had, because your opponent can just easily call a grade 2 from hand and negate the whole thing. And if you went first, you're going to give your opponent a grade 2 on their first turn, which might not be the smartest thing to do. Yes, they don't have the auto abilities from on-place effects, but if they have auto abilities that are on attack, or they have act abilities, they might have access to that. So I think this is mainly a mid to late game card, because what the interesting part about this skill is that it synergizes nicely with Blockade, because the Blockade grade 3 can retire all of the grade 2s for effectively no cost. On the Blockade turn, you basically can interpret this skill as either I draw 2 cards, or I'm gonna force you to discard another card from your hand, which means you have 1 less card to guard with the moment that I start attacking. That's actually really powerful. Now, if we move up to the grade 2, we see Seal Dragon Corduroy, I think that's how you pronounce it, and it has the ability act on Vanguard to rearguard circle. Once a turn, cost counter +1, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. Your opponent looks at 5 cards from the top of your deck, choose up to 1 grade 2 unit card, calls it to an open rearguard circle, and shuffles their deck. The auto abilities of your opponent's cards do not activate from this call. If no cards were called, you countercharge 1. So this is effectively the same thing as the grade 1, only in this case, you can get a retire for free if your opponent doesn't call anything, and that can be because of 2 reasons. Either in the top 5, there is no grade 2 and they cannot even call something, or there is a grade 2 there, but your opponent decides to not call it, because they can still do that. And this can be interesting because it allows you to get a free pop. Now, with both the grade 2 and the grade 1, you're basically going after grade 1s and grade 3s. You're going to leave the grade 2s there because you want to force your opponent to call more grade 2s to the field, because you're going to capitalize on that aspect, as we're going to see with Blockade. So this is a nice card to potentially get free snipes, or just retire something and add a new grid 2 to the field, which is going to disappear in a second once we activate Blockade's ability. And to understand that, let's take a look at Blockade, as here we've got Seal Dragon Blockade, and Blockade has 2 effects, from which one is act on Vanguard circle once a turn, cost counter +1, and retire all of your opponent's grade 2 rearguards. All of your front row units get power +10k until the end of turn for each unit retired. if no cards were retired, you get an imaginary gift Force. This is the reason why the grade 1 and grade 2 is so good, because with the grade 1 and the grade 2 and any other generic retire effects, you're going to go after your opponent's grade 1s and grade 3s, and hopefully force your opponent to call more grade 2s, because you give them an incentive to call those grade 2s, as either you're going to get a counter charge, or you're going to draw into more cards. And if they decide to opt for calling the grade 2, then they're going to make Blockade even more powerful, because that one counterblast is generating even more value, because that's one extra card they retire, and that's one extra 10k power to the front row, which is basically 30k power more to the board for every grade 2. That is a lot of value behind one counterblast, so yeah, that's actually really good. And this card has a built-in failsafe in the case that your opponent tries to play around by not calling any grade 2s. Then you just generate an extra force marker. Yes, it's a lot less value than the 10k power, but if you're gonna go for a couple of turns in the game, then the force marker will generate a bit more value as the game progresses, which can be a nice option as well to have. It's just a failsafe to at least get some value out of this particular skill. But Blockade also has a secondary effect, which is continuous on Vanguard Circle. If your opponent has no grade 2 unit on the Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle, the original critical of this unit becomes 2. Basically what this skill actually means is that you can only get the extra critical if you went second on the first grade 3 turn, because if you went first, your opponent's still at grade 2, and thus you don't get this critical. And this also tells us that you're probably gonna play with Force 1. However, that said, this does have some strategies or some interactions with Dauntless Drive Dragon, because Dauntless Drive Dragon is actually a solid backup grade 3 right target, because if you went first, you might as well just go to Dauntless if you cannot capitalize on Blockade's first effect if your opponent didn't call anything in the early game. You don't really have the grade 1 and grade 2 to capitalize on this. And in the following turn, you can go into Blockade. Then it will swing with the double critical, and because you just rode 2 times, you could have gone for Force 2 and give both force markers to the side column. Now every single attack will swing twice, thus you don't really need to rewrite anymore. And then you probably can retire a bunch of cards, because your opponent has probably dedicated cards from their hand onto the board to pressure you when they went to their grade 3 turn. So there is a nice interaction to be had here. So overall, Blockade is a very interesting deck. I think it's a bit too early to assume how strong it's going to be, because it's a unique dynamic where your opponent needs to make the right decision, or in this case the wrong decision, to give you the much needed value that you need. Now that said, let's take a look at the other clan, as we also got some Angel Feather cards. And first off, we've got this grade 1, which is Spine Celestial Jophiel. And Jophiel has the ability, auto, when this unit is rode upon, choose a card from your damage zone, and you may swap it with a unit card from your hand. This is very similar to a grade 1 that we've got, I believe, in Infinite Deity Cradle, VBT07 if I remember correctly, which basically had the same effect where when it's rode upon, you can put it into the damage zone and get a card from the damage zone onto the field. Somewhat similar, but both with the issue that on this turn, you probably only have 1 card to work with, and that means you're very RNG reliant to get the value that you need. However, this isn't really the case, because once we take a look at grade 2, you can actually see that this skill is really good, but we're gonna save that once we take a look at the grade 2, because this grade 1 also has a secondary effect, which is auto, when this unit is placed on the rearguard circle from hand, cost counter +1 and bind this unit and put the top card of your deck into the damage zone. At the end of the turn, you may put this card into your drop. If you put it into the drop, choose a card from your damage zone and put it into your hand. Now that's a wall of attacks, but basically what it does is it binds itself from the field to allow you to give yourself an extra damage for only that particular turn, and then at the end of the turn it puts itself into the drop, and then you can put 1 card from the damage zone into your hand, so it's a delayed plus as well. What the upside about this particular effect is that it can pseudo counter charge you, because you counter +1 and then you can put the card face down into your hand, so you don't really waste counter blast. But it also puts you at more damage, and that's very important, because this whole archetype is going to work around having as much damage as possible, because you want to have specific cards into the damage zone. And this does synergize with other Angel Feather cards that already exist. I believe Hygienist Angel works with this, as you get more power. The Nocio engine works with this well. It has this ultimate break skill where you want to have 5 damage, and this also can negate your opponent's heals, because you can put yourself at higher damage, and the moment you start swinging, their defensive heals might not go off because you're suddenly at higher damage than they are, which can be really good for value in general speaking. But now we're going to take a look at the grade 2, and we can understand why the grade 1 on right skill is actually really good, or should I say on written skill. As here we have the grade 2 Kendall Celestial Sariel. And Sariel has the ability, although when this unit is placed on the Vanguard circle or Rearguard circle, cost Counter Blast 1 and Soul Blast 1, search your deck for up to 1 normal unit, put it into your damage zone and shuffle your deck. If you put a card, choose a card from your damage zone and heal it. Basically what this does is, unplaced on the field, you can tutor for any card into your damage zone, and unlike the grade 1, you immediately heal a card, so it's also for free. The Counter Blast cost, you can immediately heal that Counter Blast cost, and you put the new card face up, so you don't really mind. This is the reason why the grade 1 unwritten skill is so good, because you have the grade 1, you write her on top of the grade 1, and you activate her skill first. You put in any card that you want in your hand into the damage zone, and then with the grade 1 you fetch it and put it into your hand. It's amazing. It allows you to search for any card that you want in your deck. Maybe you don't have a grade 3 right target. Well, now you do. Maybe you miss a key card, a grade 2 or a grade 1 that you need for combo potential. Well, now you do. You can fetch any card that you want, which is actually really good with this skill. And she can also work on the Rearguard circle with any other cards, because we have a lot of cards in Angel Feathers which allow us to swap cards from hand, which this card synergizes really well with. Overall, this skill is incredibly powerful and is probably going to be a staple to some extent in Angel Feathers, at least to any deck that has some damage zone manipulation, which most builds tends to do. But she also has a secondary effect which might or might not come up, and that's continues on Rearguard circle. If your damage zone has 1 or less face down cards, this unit gets boost. Angel Feathers is a clan where if you can manage your resources well enough, you can effectively use all your skills for Counter Blast 0 or Counter Blast neutral. So this might come up, but I don't think it's going to matter all too much. Now that said, let's take a look at Hamiel, as Hamiel opens up a very interesting playstyle, as we've got Prophecy, Celestial, Hamiel, and Hamiel has the following 2 abilities. Her first effect is Auto and Vanguard Circle. When this unit attacks, cost Soul Blast 1 and Counter Charge 1. That's actually pretty decent. But then stand all of your rearguards with the same card name as face-up cards in your damage zone. For every 2 units that were stand, draw a card, and all of your rearguards get power plus 5k until the end of turn. That's really good, because the effect itself counter charges, which sets up face-up cards in your damage zone. We saw with the grade 2 that also is effectively Counter Blast neutral. The grade 1 is also Counter Blast neutral, but it's at the end of the turn. But we have other cards that can fix this to some extent, which is actually really great. Now, the thing is, you want to set up your damage zone to have the same units on the field so they can restand. And you want to have as much damage as possible to be able to restand as many as possible. The grade 2 of this right line sets up our damage zone, because now we can put the units that are already on the board into the damage zone, so we can target them with this skill. And then the grade 1 allows us to get more damage, because this skill skills, because if you have 2 face-up damage that can restand 2 rearguards, you can restand them, you draw a card, and give all your units plus 5k power. But if you have 4 face-up damage that are also units on the field, you can restand those units, you draw 2 cards, and you give 10k power to all your rearguards. That's actually really good for a Soul Blast 1 that also incidentally countercharges. That's very powerful, and it's really similar to what we saw with the no-show engine, only with the no-show engine you need to work with specifically no-show cards, whereas this can work basically with any Angel Feather cards as it's not archetype bound, which is really good. But then on top of that, she also has a secondary effect, which is Auto on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. At the start of your right phase, if your damage zone has 4 or more cards, you may put the top card of your deck into the damage zone. If you do, choose a card from your damage zone, put it into your hand, and if this unit is on the Rearguard Circle, put this unit into your soul. So she effectively is a free +1 where you can cycle through your damage zone to get more cards to your hand and set up your field even better for free. And this in itself is also a counter charger, because you can just take a face down damage and put a new face up damage into the damage zone and go from there, which is actually really, really good. And then the fact if you have her as a rearguard unit is also really nice, because she puts herself into the soul, and as we've seen with a lot of very powerful effects within Angel Feathers, they cost a lot of soul, so being able to generate more soul is always a good thing to have. Now the main thing about this archetype is that you want to set up your damage zone as effectively as possible, that you have the same named in your damage zone as on the field, and we basically want to play as many cards within this build that can either put cards from our hand into the damage zone, which then can set up our damage zone, which we have a couple of great ones that can do that. And also an interesting tech for this particular build are the no-CO cards themselves. The grade 3 and the grade 2 allows you to put no-CO cards into the damage zone. They themselves are no-CO cards, so effectively if you call them to the field, they can put themselves into the damage zone to then secure the skill ability of Hamiel herself to be able to restand those particular no-CO cards. So you have different playstyles and different lines of options and build strategies to go to make this deck work, which is actually really interesting. I like this mechanic a lot, and because it's not restricted to an archetype, allows you to play all types of strategy and go with different directions. So I'm very curious how good this deck is going to be. It has a lot of promise, but I think you need to make your deck work really well to make it worthwhile. And I'm even forgetting about the fact that if you want to do that extra spice, we have the rescue cards to put even more value on the board. Because keep in mind, our rearguards will restand. So if we hit a crit during the main phase, that rearguard is going to attack twice with that crit. So there are some really interesting things to think about, and there are a lot of different ways how you can build this deck. So I'm very excited about these reveals, but that said, I'm very curious on what you guys think of these new cards. Let me in the comments down below what you think of these new Kagero Seal Dragon cards, as well as the new Celestials for Angel Feathers. Are you happy with these reveals? Can you not wait to try out what type of build and what type of strategy you want to take your favorite clan towards? And which other clan are you excited for their upcoming reveals? But that said, I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon as well. But with that said, I've been Mr. Time Leap. See you guys in the next one!